English is probably the worst written of all languages. It didn't have enough letters to go around to cover the range of sounds that the Midlands in England had in the 8th and 9th century. So some formalization, some adaptations of earlier characters from the Gaelic and other early traditions were brought in, and 3 characters were added to the 23 from Rome at that time, which gave them about 26. It still wasn't enough to carry the probably 33 or 34 sounds, and so extra marks had to be made to indicate whether it was a long sound or a short sound or whatever. Alfred, living from the middle 800s to about 920 or 25 in that range, was the first literate monarch of any part of England, and who, as he got control of the middle part of England, the Midlands, East Midlands, became a scholar and translated the consolations of Boethius and several papal bulls into Anglo-Saxon or Old English, and utilized this first English alphabet, which was, as I say, a modification of the Roman alphabet. That is probably the first evidence of a formal writing of English. This alphabet, however, though it had not enough characters to go around, had one other shortcoming. Since we had no printing, no standardization efforts, people reflected their own dialects, and so the spellings started going all over the lot. In communities which had a heavy guttural content, the OUGH started getting into our field. And though it was said much differently than we speak it now, those OUGHs, which today mean a lot of different sounds, came into the language. But they were only a few of the conventions that were established. And it had to be a pickup job. One calligrapher, if Mary will excuse me, or one learned brother in a monastery would do the best he can in using what he thought he heard as he listened to people. And so the consequence was that it was a sort of a higgledy-piggledy representation of the language of England. Now, England had been intruded into by Germanic tribes, by the Frisian Islanders, and we used to have a Frisian lady here in town, Mrs. Annette, who still remembered from her parents her Frisian language, which was sort of like watching a film that goes in and out of focus on the TV. It was, you would grasp about every third or fourth word. It was similar to you, but it wasn't German, it wasn't English, but it was partway. The Frisian Islanders were some of those Danish marauders who came over and gave Alfred and the preceding, I don't want to say kings, but leaders, gave them a lot of trouble for 200 or 300 years. And they intruded much Danish or Frisian Islander language into English. So England, or English, became a potpourri of, if you'll excuse the term, a potpourri of languages from the north side of England. And then a little later on in the 11th and 12th centuries, those French people came into England and gave them a lot of trouble and left a lot of words and a lot of their conventional spellings. So, as I say, English spelling is awful. It is not consistent. It is what we call heterophonic. You have many sounds for the same symbol. It is heterographic, many different ways of writing the same sound. It is a confounded mess. English, as it's spoken today in this country, has 40 sounds, like it or not. 40 sounds. And if anyone wants to, here is the frontispiece of the Thorndike Barnhart dictionary that every school child has or uses. And if you'll count them carefully, you'll see those are 40 sounds. I don't have enough of those. If any of you want other copies, well, we can make.
See if they'll make some.
These 40 sounds have been pretty well standardized for what we call Midland English, the English that runs from perhaps Detroit and Cleveland as far west as Kansas City. It is a fairly slow spoken English, as I am doing, perhaps 120, 30 words a minute. It's a language that is fairly expressive, as most of you know. English poetry, English theater, or American theater, are eloquent and beautiful, and nearly all the world learns them. If nothing else, they learn to read English so they can read English poetry. So we have a beautiful language which is just spelled terribly, and it's an amalgam. I said that English spelling is awful. How awful is it? There are 200 and some odd spelling patterns for the 40 sounds, and they have little regularity. The 200 spellings are so irregularly used that the learning to read is about 84 times as hard as it would be if our 40 sounds had 40 letters to go with them. It's at least that much harder than learning Spanish. A child, by the time he's in the third or fourth grade, where he was more or less master the words that he went to school with, which today is perhaps 8,000 or 9,000 words, has a massive undertaking. It is a real excuse for sight and sound reading. There is no rational way to teach a child phonics or one-for-one spelling of what he sees, what he hears.